introduce herself. So Lucretia, why don't you go ahead? Let me make sure you're unmuted here. Oh, okay, wait, can you check in your screen if you're unmuted? All right, great, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm really glad that you can join us tonight. My name is Lucretia Brewer. I'm a volunteer at Homeline, and I'm a tenant organizer leader. And I use she, her pronouns.
Great. Thanks so much, Lucretia. So for folks who just joined, I invite you to introduce yourselves in the chat if you like. Just name where you're coming from and what brought you to the webinar tonight. So the agenda tonight, I'm going to present a bit of content for about 15 minutes. Then we'll hear from Lucretia, who will talk about putting some of that content into practice on the ground in an organizing campaign. And then we'll have a Q&A session at the end where we all get to talk to each other about our experiences tenant organizing and get some feedback from each other on advice. And I encourage you to hold on to your questions and be prepared to ask them at the end of the webinar. Thank you very much. And without further ado, let's move forward. So if you haven't gotten to know Homeline before, Homeline provides free and low-cost legal organizing, education, and advocacy services for tenants throughout Minnesota. So we have a hotline, which is primarily how renters in Minnesota come into contact with us, that provides legal advice. Tonight, I'm an organizer on staff. I am not an attorney, so I'm not going to be giving legal advice. If you do have legal questions, I want to make sure those are taken care of appropriately. So please call our hotline. Our hotline is in 4 different languages, and you can see the phone numbers here on the screen. Tonight, we'll be talking specifically about organizing. So organizing tactics. What are these, right? One really important distinction between organizing tactics is this idea of a sword and a shield. If anyone would like to say in the chat what they think might be the difference of an organizing tactic between a sword and a shield, please type in here. I'd love to see what you think. But I'll start talking about how I understand it. So the idea of a shield, as far as an organizing tactic, is knowing your legal rights, which are meant to protect you, right? So the shield is something you put in front of you to protect you. This is often knowing your legal rights, such as your right to get repairs made in 14 days, right? So if you don't get a repair made, you can tell your landlord by law, you have 14 days to make this repair. So that's using a shield as an organizing tactic because it's a protection that already exists for you. And what you're doing is you're enforcing it, you're holding it up, right? That's a really important part of organizing. And it can often be effective. Unfortunately, it is sometimes not enough, right? We may have all had experiences where we found that the law does not protect us adequately in our situation. Either there's not a law about the situation we're facing, or the law isn't strong enough and it's not helpful in our particular issue we're dealing with. So that's when the sword comes in. The sword, the idea of the sword is an organizing tactic that's not defensive, but offensive, right? So these are tactics that are different than your legal protections. They're tactics that are meant to be proactive, are meant to catch someone's attention, and are intended to push your issue forward, right? So that's the idea of the sword, is it's an offensive tactic, and that's mostly what we'll be concentrating on tonight. So when in an organizing campaign, should you have a conversation about tactics with your tenant association or just your neighbors who you're working with? What I'm presenting here is a graphic developed out of the U of M from their Cura department, which does urban research, and some amazing organizers in that department, Malik Holt Shabazz and Ned Moore, came up with this graphic, so much credit to them. these are demonstrating, these little bubbles here are demonstrating all the different pieces of what it takes to build a strong organizing campaign in your building. And it demonstrates a timeline that's also cyclical. So what I want us to take a look at is where are tactics on this timeline? The first person to spot it, put in the chat what color it is. I know the words are small, so if you can't read it, don't worry. But if you can see what color the tactics come in, please let me know. Ooh, not there yet. Let me see. It might be too small, so I'll reveal it. It's in the red section here. So what this means is that in the timeline of organizing, as far as where talking about tactics comes, it comes pretty late in the development of an organizing campaign. The first step would be here, building your base, getting to know you, which means getting to know your neighbors essentially. After that, and after developing trusting relationships, you're going to identify the most important issue that you all share, that you want to work on, right? After that, then comes this red section of the timeline where you're talking about, okay, so we know who we are, we know what our issue is. Now we need to figure out how we're going to get that issue addressed, how we're going to solve it. So the reason I point this out is that many tenant groups want to talk about tactics very early on. In some of their earliest meetings, they are interested in talking about how can we get our problems fixed, right? And that's really important, a really important conversation. But what you want to make sure you have first is strong relationships and trust between neighbors. And then you want a clearly defined common issue that you all are ready to work on together. Only then could you take that third successful step of developing strategy around how to get that issue solved. So that's my caveat for our conversation tonight, which is that this comes later in the general campaign building structure. It comes in this general area of power analysis that you can, I'll go backwards, you can see here in red, community power analysis. And again, this is a document from Kira. And what I'm going to talk about tonight comes after you've already defined what your demand is, so what you're looking to get, what you're looking to win, and you've also already defined your target, so who you're going to get your demand met by, right? These are really important steps before talking about how you're going to do it. Is the what and the who, and then we go to the how. Also, as a note, all of these slides will be available along with the recording, so you can find these links and these worksheets if they're helpful to you later. Some questions to consider when you do get to that third step, figuring out what your tactics are. One question is, how public is the action we decide to take together? Is what we're doing together as neighbors a private or a public action? And is it private in the sense that maybe we are writing a letter to our landlord who we're not really showing to anyone else? It's just between us and our landlord. I would consider that a more private action. Or is this a public action? Are we calling up the news stations and saying, come film us and while we talk about our issue, right? That's an important question to think about. It helps define these different buckets of actions that are available to you. Another question is, how risky is this action? Are we, and being very considerate about everyone involved in the group, are we ready to take action like this? You know, something like protesting, going to your landlord's office downtown, maybe. That can feel scary, right? And that can have some risks involved. It can feel like exposure to some people. It definitely could get your landlord mad. So before taking an action, thinking about the risks involved with all the tactics you're discussing and making sure everyone's prepared to take those risks and that you have a safety plan in your back pocket. The third question to consider is, how effective is this action? Is this going to get us what we want, right? So an example of that is thinking, well, maybe we want our, we want repairs made in our building, and we've bothered our management over and over about it, and the management says, I want to do this, but your owner isn't giving us any money to make these repairs. And then you design this elaborate action to protest at the management's office, right? When actually the people who really hold the power in the situation seem to be the owners of the building, who are unwilling to pay for the repairs, right? So when asking how effective is this action, that's when you're going to go back to making sure you know what you're asking for and who you're asking it from. So the tactics you choose should always circle back to who's going to give you what you want and what is it exactly that you want, right? So here are some possible organizing tactics. I'm going to read through them. As I read through them, I invite everyone here tonight to add some other suggestions in the chat. What are some organizing tactics that you've seen that you've been really inspired by? I would love to know and add to this list. Some that I came up with and gathered from some research includes writing a letter to your landlord, not listed here, but that's often the first step, writing a letter stating your demands as a tenant association. Usually part of that letter is an invitation to get your landlord to meet with you in person to talk about these issues, right? That's again a private action. And public option could be writing a letter to the editor of your local paper, exposing the conditions of your building, getting more people in public to talk about your issue. Some other examples of this could be reaching out to local representatives. That's really common. If you're getting nowhere with your landlord, going to someone else with power in your geographical area, like a city council, could be really effective. You could organize a rally, a press conference. You could call media, like I mentioned before. You could flyer your neighborhood and door knock other apartment buildings or homeowners near you. Make sure they know what's going on. These are all potential tactics you could use. Again, I welcome anyone who's joining us to say in the chat some other tactics that you've seen and you've been inspired by in organizing campaigns, and I'll read them out loud if you throw them in there. So this is not an exhaustive list. My suggestion to you is be creative, right? Think about what's gonna grab people's attention, right? Especially if you're going public with your issue. There's so much in the media right now, so many news stories. What makes sense for you and your community, and what is the right way to, get people's attention, make them really care about what's going on. One thing I really love seeing in organizing actions is the use of art. I think that designed posters, and I even in not in tenant organizing necessarily, but in other activist spaces, seeing people make puppets or costumes, and just attention grabbing and creative ways to communicate about your issue. So the last important piece about choosing tactics to consider is this idea of escalation. So many of you intuitively would think about this and understand what escalation is, but just in case, what I mean by escalation is getting from a place of collaboration to a place of confrontation, potentially with your target, who often in tenant organizing situations will be your landlord. So what does this look like realistically? Well, let's think about that list again. So a collaborative tactic, again, feel free to shoot this in the chat if you have a suggestion, but a collaborative tactic could be something like writing a letter to your landlord, letting them know what it is that you need as a tenant association, right? Asking them for a meeting. That's also an invitation to collaborate, potentially. what you would want to do, you want to start there at that place of collaboration. And the reason is, A, it's less risky, right? When you're asking your landlord to do the right thing, you're just defending your rights. There could be some risk there, but you're you will certainly incur less risk than knocking on their door, right, and protesting their office. So, starting with a low risk situation, you might get your issue won. That could very well be. You might not need to go extreme, right? So, you want to start with these lower risk, more collaborative options. Um, what happens next then is if you don't get what you want, maybe your landlord never responds to your letter and never shows up to a meeting. Maybe they respond and they say no to your demands, right? Well, you're not going to settle for that, right? So the next step then in your organizing would be thinking about, okay, we've tried collaboration. Now it's that didn't work, right? We hit a dead end with collaborative tactics. Now we can begin to think about more confrontational tactics. Um, we can escalate our issue, right? Because it matters to us and it's not right that we're experiencing what we're experiencing. So, a more escalatory action could be something like contacting your local representatives, your city council, your state senator. The reason this is a little more confrontational is that landlords do not like to get called out by public officials, right? If they get a call from the mayor saying, hey, you're not treating your tenants right, that's a pretty big deal to them, right? They want to avoid that. They don't like that. So um, going to a public official is a little more escalatory than just going directly to your landlord. But again, this is why you start with collaboration, because the first thing you're going to hear when you go to city council or when you call up the mayor or your representative is they're going to say, well, have you asked your landlord, right? What happened when you directly asked your landlord? And then you can say, well, actually, we tried three different things. We sent a letter, we made a meeting invitation, we, yeah, we held a barbecue. Um, those didn't work. That's why we're coming to you now. So your argument is even stronger if you can demonstrate that you started in a collaborative place and it didn't get you anywhere, right? Because then the mayor's going to say, oh, wow, you really did try. It looks like the only thing left is for me to intervene, right? And then it goes up and up from there. And we could get creative about what that looks like. Um, right now, I'm going to stop talking because that was a lot of information. And again, thank you for bearing with me. I'm excited to hear your feedback and questions in the Q&A section. But I want us to turn to our guest speaker, Lucretia Brewer, who's going to talk to you all about what this looks like in action and tell her story about organizing with her neighbors and how they chose different tactics along that escalation ladder to get what they needed. So welcome, Lucretia. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Erin, so much. Well, thank you all for being here tonight. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about my experience. A tenant organizer. Is that me? Yes, it is me. I hope after I speak with you tonight that you will see that you can become a tenant leader and an organizer too. I was just living my life. I lived in an assisted living apartment building in Newport, Minnesota. I received a letter from the apartment landlord saying he was going to evict 75% of the building occupancy in 30 days. If we left before that, he would give us up to $800. This apartment complex was 1 year and 2 months old and cost $20 million to build. Landlord's reason to shoo us all out was to, quote, refurbish the apartment building. So a couple of things I left out. The landlord received a lot of grants from the state because he accepted vulnerable, disabled adults. He received approximately $100,000 to $150,000 per year for each one of us from our caddy waiver services money. He was supposed to offer nursing, household services, personal care services, etc. He did not provide these services to the level required. CADDY is like community inclusion for disabled, vulnerable, 55-year-old and older adults in this situation. That receive money for services to stay in the community to live rather than live in pay rent on top of that. It was late October when we received the letter. First thought, moving in the snow. After that, racing, rambling thoughts rushed in. We just moved here and we thought this was our final place to move in our lives. We made friends. Physically, I can't go through moving again. Where will I move to? Then anger. Why is he doing this? This is not fair. We were all so angry. We gathered together for several days just being angry. Then a couple of tenants called news channels, newspapers, any connections they knew might be able to help us. Someone called Homeline. There was so much excitement. Homeline was coming to come and talk with us. A couple of news channel people were coming also. It was so nice to feel hopeful. Aaron and another person came from Homeline. I felt so sorry for them. All the tenants were trying to tell them something and they had not even gotten their coats off yet. Emotional. That describes the whole process from October 21st until now, June 2022. Every day and even every hour sometimes. The hardest thing about being a leader is setting other examples and tone for each step of the trail you are going on. Even though you are disappointed in an outcome, you want to yell and scream, this isn't right, not fair. You have to keep the tone and keep everybody optimistic. I will explain later of the great example I saw of passion, fight, and dignity of a tenant organizer. The first meeting we held, we learned that in our case, Homeline was there to help us to get attention. They listened to so many of our stories. We had sign-up sheets for names and phone numbers of tenants. We had a big board that we made lists on, lists of what we were angry about. We refined wording to specifically list what we were angry about, what we wanted changed, who was going to change it, who we wanted to contact, have a press conference. Erin had lists of reporters and organizations she had worked with in the past that could help us, a list for what needed to be done, door knocking on apartments, sign making, who wanted to share their personal story with the public about their issues with the landlord by giving a speech. Lists are important. People feel they are moving forward with a plan they helped create, a way to see a path to the end of all of this. Funny story, when I was making signs in the community center room, someone called the landlord and told him about it. He was so angry, he ordered the janitors to lock us out of our beloved community room. Wherever we gathered throughout the day, that's where we gathered throughout the day. When they asked me to leave, I said no. They asked me again, and I said no, I'm not finished with these signs yet. The janitor said, if you don't leave, I'll just lock you in here. I said, okay. After 3 times, he said, I'll do it. I said, yep, that's going to look real good in the newspapers. Janitor locks disabled, vulnerable, elderly adult and her dog in apartment's community room because she was illegally making protest signs because the landlord was illegally evicting 3/4 of the tenants. I didn't get locked in. More to come on the community room later. The press came. The outside weather was beautiful. Couldn't have it outdoors. The landlord wouldn't have it. We invited the landlord prior to this to a meeting. He didn't want to come. We tried everything prior to that. Hold on, I just lost my speech. Hold on. We received a lot of good publicity from the press conference that we had. well-written stories, TV, news, etc. I was actually approached by a person from Housing Justice wanting to interview me. I had no idea how important that interview would be. As I came inside after the press conference, during the press conference, the landlord had the janitors take out all the tables and chairs out of the community room and locked it up. Sadly, it's still that way today. So instead of being angry, when I walked outside to tell Aaron, I walked past the janitors and a couple of important apartment staff. I kept walking slowly and I said to myself out loud, wow, I can't believe I missed it. You got all those tables and chairs out in that amount of time and not a piece of them left in the hall or lobby. I've never seen you work that fast and I missed it. You know, we must have really scared Mr. Blank to be so mad to lock up that room. I guess what we're doing is working. And I walked away. One thing you probably see when opposing your landlord is power and money being used against you. I contacted Newport Fire Department to discuss the locking of the community room. It causes people who are disabled to walk halfway around the apartment building instead of a quarter of the way around the apartment building. If you are using a walker, that is a lot of difference. If you need time to get out of the building, without getting into a lot, let's just say in the past, it had been an issue if the doors were locked. When I called the fire chief, he said it wasn't a problem. I said, you told them before that they had to keep those doors unlocked. He said, ma'am, I've been to every fire alarm that building has ever had, and there's been a lot, but I don't ever remember saying that. And I said, okay, yeah, all I can say is it was a cover-up. In my opinion, that fire chief was not telling the truth. We had decided and planned with Homeline to go out to the next Newport City Hall meeting, kind of escalating it like Aaron was talking about. We were very excited about going to be heard. Having City Hall members contact the landlord and tell him he couldn't do this. Aaron said she would be happy if we could get 5 to 6 people to come. Ha ha ha. We had a rented bus. It was full and a carload full of people went to City Hall. We surprised Aaron. Remember, I told you I would tell you about an example of passion, fight, and dignity? Well, we were walking into City Hall, respectfully. The person in charge, closest to my recollection, says, all right, I heard about all you coming. I'm not going to allow it. Sorry. This problem isn't, hold on, I keep losing my, hold on just 1 second. Okay, here we are. Okay, remember I told you I would tell you about the example of passion, fight, and dignity. Well, we were all walking into City Hall respectfully. The person in charge says, closest to my recollection, all right, I heard about all of you coming. I am not going to allow it. This problem isn't in our jurisdiction or power to do anything about. The same story just retold by different people. I'm not going to have it. I will let maybe 2 or 3 of you at the most speak, but that is it. Aaron says, Lucretia, you go. Wow, I did it. Those words actually came out of my mouth. It was only the second time I had given a speech, the first being a few sentences at the press conference. I bet you think this is where the passion, fight, and dignity comes in, that I did my first speech, right? Nope. I sit down and Erin goes up to the mic, phone in hand. She is reading law that specifically states that Newport City Hall members are exactly under jurisdiction of what is going on with the apartment building and landlord and its tenants. She is amazing. Tell them that they need to listen to us, that we are being treated unfairly by the landlord, and you were there at the opening ribbon cutting ceremony. Respectfully, it's time you help the people that you promised things to live there. She ends her speech by asking if they would just call and talk to the landlord. Amazingly, one of the committee members spoke out and said, "I'll call him tomorrow. I don't know what I can do, but I'll call him tomorrow." Have you ever seen fire in someone's eyes because they are so mad, especially because they know they were on the side of the law and got turned away? That is passion, fight, and dignity that I saw Erin display. That's what I saw in Erin's eyes welled up with water as she walked back to her seat. Power and money had been at play. Someone had spoke to the committee before the committee even started. Remember, I talked about being a leader and keeping the tone up. Erin talked briefly about the upsetting part of City Hall members' actions. But what she talked most about was how many of us showed up, how that must have surprised the City Hall. There was a reporter there. What a great story that'll be. The two people that got to speak, what an amazing job you did under pressure. This is the attribute of a leader. It didn't feel like a defeat. It felt like we won. After witnessing that night at City Hall, after watching Erin and feeling her strong emotions she had for the tenants in Newport, the passion, I knew from that moment on, I wanted to be able to become a tenant organizer. I've learned so much. I've been able to work with other people that are not from my apartment building. I've had so many opportunities to stand up and speak about tenant rights and changes that need to be made. I am so blessed that my friends believed in me and trusted me to lead our fight in Newport. The interview I had the night of the first press conference was with someone from Housing Justice. I am in litigation with my landlord, and just because of circumstances, I'm the only one left able to do it. But as I said from the very beginning, I'm fighting for each one of us tenants that have gone through this. Hopefully a solution will be made that comes to each and every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucretia, for what you shared just now. And thank you for your kind words about me. I wish everyone could have seen you at that evening in front of City Council as well and heard your fiery speech. You were one of the few people they actually let speak, and you did so very powerfully. And yeah, just I'm grateful to have been able to work with you on that campaign. And thank you for telling everyone the story of that organizing tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, that about concludes our content, and I'd love to hear from you all right now. If you have a question, feel free to throw it in the chat. You can also let me know in the chat that you'd like to ask your question live, and I can unmute you so that you can talk through a situation you're facing, whatever you'd like to share tonight. And just know that this recording will be available online. So if you prefer to use anonymizing information, that's just fine, or speak in generalities, we can do that. But I'd love to hear from you all about what you're working on and have Lucretia and I talk to you about what kind of organizing tactics might be best suited to getting your issues won. And so while you're all coming up with some questions here, I'll start with one for you, Lucretia, which is, how did you and your neighbors consider the different risks involved with the actions you were taking? And how did you know that people felt safe and comfortable to take those risks?
Well, as in any group of people, some people were afraid if we did this or that, then he's really going to get mad. I've always likened this to an abusive relationship. You don't want to make this person mad because he'll come after you then, and like that. And so we tried to discuss the pros and cons of different things, and then that we wanted to do, and then discuss it and try to lessen people's fear. And if they didn't want to be part of a situation, then they weren't part of it. And but I think almost every time everybody was very supportive, even if they weren't the one who wanted to give the speech or give the interview, they were supportive of the person doing it. They just didn't want their name out there. And those people are important too, because they'll talk to reporters and different things. They just don't want their name used. And they've just, especially in our building, because we are vulnerable adults and many of us have mental health issues and different things, that it is difficult to put yourself out there because your anxiety and everything gets worked up already with a situation, and then add, different things, and it gets worse. So we just really tried to use really good communication skills, and having, if any rumors started going around, we nipped them in the butt right away. That was the biggest thing we did. I think if anybody's going to be a organizer, that is the biggest key. If you hear something going around, you just hold a meeting and get it figured out right away, because it'll just take on a life of its own if you don't.
That's great advice, Lucretia. Absolutely, making sure that communication is clear and open and there aren't misunderstandings. Definitely when people are feeling threatened or nervous, the rumor mill starts up and rumors can get out of hand and maybe make people more nervous than they need to be, right? So
Yes.
I also really liked your point about everyone being important in the tactics and everyone being useful regardless of their comfort level with different actions. Everyone has an important part to play. And I'm seeing that Karen said in the chat here, thank you to Lucretia. I'm going to read it to you and make sure you see it. Karen says, thank you, Lucretia. An amazing story. I'm thinking of ways I could possibly share the recording with my group.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And Karen, I know in your introduction, you said that you work with you're forming a tenant organization in a low-income apartment building. If you'd like to talk more about that, I would welcome hearing even just where you're at right now. And it doesn't have to be a specific question about tactics, but I welcome you to talk more about it if you'd like. If anyone else has a question, I'd love to hear them in the chat here, or again, feel free to let me know you'd like to speak and I can unmute you. I'm not seeing one right now, so luckily I have another one for you, Lucretia. And oh, good. It looks like Karen's, you'd like to share what your group is working on. So we'll pause my question and we'll go to you. What I'll do is I will let you unmute if you'd like, Karen, to talk about it. Just let me know if you're having any trouble unmuting here. Okay, we're not able to hear you. You should be able to unmute, so feel free to do so at any time if you get that worked out on your computer. And we'd love to hear from you. If it doesn't work out, feel free to share some more content in the chat. My question for you, Lucretia, is what action that you and your neighbors took made you feel most energized and inspired and alive? Like how did you feel when you were doing that action? Yeah.
I think City Hall, even though it didn't turn out like we wanted it to, there's a lot of energy to be had when, I wouldn't say we got defeated, but when things go wrong, that can cause a lot of energy in people. And it just got us more fired up. I really think that it just got us more fired up. And I was trying to think of what our next step was after that. I'm sure probably another press conference, but I can't exactly remember what we did after that. I know we got involved with lawyers after that, and we were so grateful for that, that Housing Justice and Southern Minnesota Legal Services took us on and took our case, and we're so grateful for that. But people had to make certain choices along the way, and I think the one thing that I wanted to be sure and mention was, so when you're in an apartment building, you know, there's people who are out and about, and then there's people who are kind of recluse and you don't see much of them. And some people felt like those people didn't care. Why are we worrying about them? Da, 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 da. Well, in our case, you know, our specialty in our building, it could be because somebody might not be mobile or healthy enough to get out and about. Out in the world, it just might be somebody's not feeling very comfortable being social out and about in the world and this and that. But my point is you still need a door knock on that door, and you still need to give flyers, and you still need to try and even if they don't speak, even if you just write them a note, letting them know this is what we're doing, and we're fighting for you also, so they feel included.
Yeah.
I think it's so important, because you just don't want anybody to feel left out. Once you start having us and them, it's just not good. And I just didn't want anybody to feel like we weren't working for each and every one of them.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point, Lucretia, that you know, some folks might not be ready to join your actions right away, or ready to join the organizing, might be kind of quiet at the door, and they can have their own reasons why, you know, especially folks who don't want to take risks at the moment. And I absolutely agree with you that continuing to still consider those people important, and then like those neighbors really um, like important folks to keep informed, to keep knocking on that door, you know, unless they tell you never come back.
Yeah,
Otherwise, continuing to keep everyone in the loop is really important, because you also never know when someone will become ready. And I think we saw that even at your building, right, Lucretia? Some people who were really quiet at
yes,
first then suddenly became so activated, right? And that's always a
yes,
possibility. Yeah.
yes. We had this one gentleman that he had been so quiet in the apartment building always, and then when this was going on, he kind of slowly walked to get his mail and kind of listened to here and a little bit there, and unfortunately this person passed away. But to his tribute, he got on the bus and he went to City Hall, and I was so proud of him, because it took so much for that person to get on that bus, even really get out of the building. And he went to City Hall. By golly, he went to City Hall. He was about 7 foot tall, so everybody knew he was there, whether he spoke or not, you know. And I was so very proud of him, and still am. And yeah, you know, and there's been other people like that too that just weren't really involved, and now they are. And you know, I wish this whole situation would have ended up a little bit different than it is. And we'll see whatever happens at the end of this. God only knows, you know, but to the end, whatever I ask for, I'll ask for it for everybody, you know, and that's all I can do. So that's what my goal always was. And that's what will be all the way to the end. So, but yeah, so, you know, there's great stories. Somebody should just, you know, have a scriber from the first meeting on, writing down how things go, and they have a journal of it, because it is a memorable journey, that is for sure.
That is too true. Organizing, if nothing else, is memorable.
Yeah.
It's always exciting, never boring.
Yes.
Well, there are two things in the chat I'll draw our attention to. First, I'll start with Karen. Since unmuting won't work, I'll share that what you said in the chat, which is that Juan at Homeline, my colleague and a fabulous organizer at Homeline helped you and your neighbors set up a separate email for your tenant group. That's great. That's a really important part of executing a lot of this organizing, is having often, an email that can communicate with landlords or with other people and keeps everyone anonymous, and can communicate for the whole group. And then you were saying that Housing Justice Center, who also worked with Lucretia in her story, someone there named Harper had helped you a lot. And you're looking forward to working with someone new there. So yes, Housing Justice Center is a fabulous organization who Lucretia mentioned and Karen's mentioning. They also provide some organizing support, but mostly do impact litigation, and so are interested in taking on cases, especially creative cases that challenge tenant landlord law in Minnesota to do better by renters. So certainly look them up. Then Gabe has a question here. I think it's a great question. This is for you, Lucretia. Gabe says, you said the property management tried to kick you out of the community room when you were making signs. And Gabe says they loved that story, by the way. But are there any other ways that the management tried to make your organizing more difficult by either intimidating or interfering with your work? And how did you deal with that?
Yes, they did. And still is. So after we couldn't use the community room, then we used outside to do that press conference. But then, that was in November, and then winter came, so we couldn't do them outside anymore. So then we tried to do them upstairs in the second floor. It's supposed to be a cafe, but they had never had any food or anything there to have. Funny story there. And so we would go up there, and then they told us they didn't want any attorneys there. And we weren't allowed to have them there. Now, I think I found out that wasn't the way it could be, but that's what he wanted to do. And then he started locking up the cafe, so where we couldn't go in there. And then I guess he finally decided to unlock that. And then he started putting an employee sitting in the corner in a chair, writing notes about everything we talked about. So, yeah, he's intimidated privately people that live there. Like I said, I just moved out last Friday, and it's still quite the mess there. Somebody got a text about a month ago that just said wings, and then it said move out, and they have no idea who sent it or anything like that. And he never talked about it with anybody else, so I don't know if anybody else got one. I didn't get one, but I don't know. And they are doing new contracts with some people, and they're just so stupid still with the caddy waiver stuff. They're still saying they're doing things that they're not doing and wanting the state to give them money for it. And so, no, he hasn't learned, he hasn't listened, he hasn't had a coming to Jesus time, because he just, I don't know how a man does this to anyone, let alone disabled. I hate to say elderly people that, they have a lot just to deal with the health issues every day, let alone this kind of stuff. And I can't tell you how many people I talked out of just walking away and leaving all their stuff. And they were going to go to a shelter, and because they were so frightened by this man. And then I would find out the next morning that I wasn't there to talk to them at 10 o'clock at night, and they walked out and they left everything, left in a cab, and was going to go to homeless shelters. Somebody would tell me. And that was heartbreaking for me. That was just heartbreaking. And as a tenant, you have to learn that you can give so much, and then you just can't be with somebody 24 hours a day, and they have to have room to make their decisions. if I was the landlord, I wouldn't want that on my conscience. And but there was at least 4 or 5 families that I know of that did that. So
Thank you for sharing that, Lucretia. That's, yeah, I just want to hold that right here. It's heavy stuff. And I appreciate you and all of your wisdom so much tonight. And I appreciate everyone who's here on the webinar, who's watching, who's doing the good work. I see you, I value you and appreciate you so much. Renting is our lives, right? Our lives depend on having stable housing, and renters matter, and stable housing really matters for our well-being in our lives. So this is hard stuff. And I want to highlight a couple. You said something, Lucretia?
there are successes. I don't mean to put it on a down low leaving. I mean,
That's just what I
there's
was gonna
wonderful
say.
successes. Yeah, of people that have made it through and, you know, got exactly what they wanted from him and this and that, you know. So, and like I said, I'm still in the fight. He's not let go and walked away yet. So I just feel like he's not going to be able to. So I really think our Raha day will be coming, you know. So yeah, all you can do is just keep working at it, you know. You just keep working at it and always evaluate and always cheer on your successes and learn from your not so much successes. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. And I loved what you said earlier about going to City Hall and, you know, getting rudely shut down by the acting city manager, whomever that was. And some people could look at that as a failure, but in fact, it could also be seen. And to me, it was truly a success in that you all were heard, even though you weren't each given 3 minutes. You were seen, you made a huge impact, and the reporter who was there watched that city manager shut you all down, and that made the story, right? So sometimes something that looks like a failure actually works to your advantage, right?
true.
And is a
So true.
success.
That was awesome.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
you know, successes and failures, it's in the eye of the beholder, really. And
So
a lot of the successes for me in organizing, and I think Lucretia, you can relate to this too, are the relationships that I've built. And those are so sacred. And those, no one can affect those, right? You get to have those no matter what.
so true. So true.
Yeah. Well, any last words, Lucretia, from you before we close out tonight?
I know this is a difficult time for everybody. The rent help Minnesota not being passed through and evictions being as normal as of a June 1st. Just everybody take care of yourself, get rest, eat well, exercise well, and just have compassion for all those that you work with and talk to, and just keep fighting for what you think is right.
100%. Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you so much, Lucretia.
Thanks for
And thank
inviting
you,
me.
everyone. Yes,
Yes,
fabulous to have you. All right, well, take good care, just like Lucretia said. Take care of yourselves first. That's most important. And I'll look forward to connecting with all of you. I'm going to put my email in the chat here so you can reach out to me directly if you'd like. And I welcome more conversations and hope to see you on future webinars, and otherwise keep getting to know each other. So more power to you all, and have a great night. All right.
bye.
Bye all.